Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is approximately 2 o'clock or slightly after 2 o'clock on Wednesday, June 15th, here in the Quad Cities. We are having an Empowered Living Club meeting. And as promised, part of the Empowered Living Club is educational. We would welcome you to our new series, which is called or is titled Perspectives on Aging in Place. It's a new series about how to stay home longer and with better quality of life. A series of discussions that we'll have with industry experts and hopefully providing you with some frank and unique, empowering insights. Today's perspective is on reverse mortgages, how to stay home with reverse mortgages or reverse mortgages as a potential opportunity to help you stay at home longer and hopefully with better quality of life. So you keep that in mind. This is brought to you, as I said, it's part of the Empowered Living Club. Empowered Living, I think most of the people on here have heard of it and have been introduced to it. It is a new community resource designed to empower all of us as we meet the challenges of aging and the opportunities as well. So the club motto is facing the challenges of aging together. So one of them certainly is how can we stay at home longer on aging in place. Today's experts, well, I've listed myself and I think most people know me here. I am the chief patient, I'm Jamie Long. I am the chief patient advocate for GolderCare Solutions. And I've been doing that for about 14 years. Our special guest today, whom we welcome and are glad to have, is Roberta Pulse. And Roberta is a senior loan originator with the Cherry Creek Mortgage Company. Let's take a look at the next slide if we can. And just a little bit more about Roberta. You'll see on that slide, it says that Roberta specializes in forward and reverse mortgages. She serves Iowa and Illinois. She is based here in the Quad Cities. So we're glad to have you with us today and thank you for being here. Starting right into it, and Roberta, you're going to have to interrupt me when you feel like it. We've got just a couple of introductory slides. This is an educational session. It is not intended to be rudimentary education. It's presumed that people have some idea of the difference between a reverse mortgage and a regular or a forward mortgage. So we've got a few slides here just to recall that. How is a reverse mortgage different from a forward mortgage? You want to move the slide? Most people know a mortgage, or most mortgages are forward mortgages. The key there is that we borrow money and we make payments over time, okay? It's harder to do as we age and we retire and we don't have a regular stream of income or as much income. So we might be doing a reverse mortgage. Let's stay on this slide though. We might be doing a reverse mortgage in which we take money, but we don't make regular payments. They have a tendency to pile up over time. So the payments, we don't make regular payments. The interest continues to build, and then we pay off the mortgage at a certain point in the future. Would you say that that's a kind of the essence of it, Roberta?
Yes, absolutely. And you definitely nailed it. On a forward mortgage, you go to the bank, credit union, an institution, and you borrow $50,000. And for easy math, you have a monthly payment then after that for principal and interest of $250. And you continue to pay that as well as your taxes and insurance. On a reverse mortgage, you borrow the same $50,000, but you don't get your checkbook out every month and pay that $250. You're still obligated. You still have that monthly payment, but it accumulates against the remaining equity in your home. So it saves you the spendable cash that you have.
Yeah, that's really it. So, and these 2 or 3 slides here that we have show that. So forward mortgage, as we said, most mortgages are forward mortgage. You borrow a sum of money, maybe you're purchasing a home. Maybe you're a young couple and you want to buy a home and you don't have the money to pay cash. So you borrow that money, as Roberta has indicated, you pay it down with periodic loan payments, usually monthly, over time. And over that time, the loan balance declines. The objective is to pay that loan off over time. So as we've indicated, it's typically used to finance the purchase of a home. We start off with a significant loan. And in Roberta's example, it was $50,000. And we start off with little or no equity in the house, maybe the down payment. And the loan balance comes down and the equity goes up over time. Slide next shows, I think, reverse mortgages, which is a special kind of mortgage. Am I correct in saying that, Roberta?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's a
And
mortgage that gives you dignity.
that's, yeah, okay. And we're going to be talking about that today, probably guess, folks. So in that one, somebody borrows a sum of money, as Roberta's indicated, oftentimes one lump sum, or it may be building up over time. There may be monthly amounts that come out. It's generally not intended to be paid down over time. It's to be paid off at an event in the future, at the time that I leave the house. So it would be when I pass away, when I go into long-term care, when I move or get another house, etc. So it's not intended to be paid down over time. It eliminates those periodic loan payments, and that's so important. And I think we're going to be talking about that. Some people really, that makes a huge difference in their quality of life. The loan balance, as Roberta has indicated, increases over time. Either I'm taking out more money, more principal. Like I said, maybe I'm taking out $300 a month. And I think that Roberta will be talking about that as well. And also the interest accumulates because I'm not making monthly or periodic payments. So typically it's used to liquidate the equity of a house by retired people while they continue to live in it. Okay. So they start off with full equity and the equity goes down over time. And they start out with little balance on the loan and the loan balance goes up. So let's take a quick look at the next slide. So this is a slide that we've added, and it says with a reverse mortgage, you can have your cake and eat it too. What were you going to say, Roberta?
I said, I like this.
Yeah. So here we got some options. All righty. I'm at a stage in life. Maybe I have retired. And what do? I can keep my house and live in it. And I can leave the cash, the equity tied up in it. If I've got enough income and enough assets, I can do that. And I don't need to worry about, say, a reverse mortgage. On the other hand, sometimes people will say, I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to liquidate all the cash value or the equity. And then I'm going to move somewhere. I don't know where, an apartment or something. You still got to have money with which to pay the apartment rent. And the nice thing about owning a house is oftentimes you don't pay rent monthly.
Especially with how expensive rent is nowadays.
Mm-hmm. So selling the house, you got to have somewhere to live unless you're planning on moving in under the bridge. So this one is a way of kind of having it both. You get to keep your house and live in it, but you can access some of the cash which you might need or you might want for various things. So how do you pay for it? You don't get all the cash that you would if you sold it. Okay. You're going to have expenses. So the amount of cash you can get in it isn't 100% of equity now or over time. You will pay some of that for the convenience and the use of the money. Okay. But this is a nice way. It's a nice tool. And that's kind of launches our discussion into it. I think, where are we? Okay. Well, Roberta, you want to look at this, take this slide by chance?
Yes, because a reverse mortgage, if we follow around the bullet points, a home loan for those age 62 or over, that's important. you have to be 62 or older to qualify for a reverse mortgage. Your income qualifying is just that you can afford the taxes and insurance and basic upkeep. It allows the borrower to tap home equity for cash. And you can do that, like Jamie said, in a lump sum, or you can just leave it there and never use it, but you know that if something happens, you can instantly tap into it. Do not need to make a monthly payment. Like I said, that you technically you do have a payment obligation, but that's why you don't borrow 100%. You only get, say, 50% of the equity. That's an estimate. But that's because the remaining 50% will pay for that monthly $250 payment. And trade-off is lower proceeds. That blue's hard to read when you sell the home. Is that?
That's right. So that's the trade-off, as we said. You're going to eat up some of the equity, so you're not going to get it all at the time that you sell.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Now, you certainly can make a monthly payment on a reverse mortgage.
Oh, that's right. You can, can't you?
Yes. And when you make that monthly payment, it actually goes into a line of credit that can grow. And so you build up a growth fund that you don't pay taxes on. I know we're going to talk more about that later. Or you can start out owing $20,000, maybe you had to pay some bills or something off, and things happen, you get money, you can pay that $20,000 off, have your home free and clear again.
Well, let's start. So we have not, at this point, folks, we're kind of switching more into the, as promised, the discussion. So we don't have a whole series of slides. It's not a presentation. We have some slides to help everybody, especially us, kind of stay on track. So we have some matters here or questions that we start out with as we start the discussion. When do reverse mortgages work best? What circumstances make them most appropriate? And what features of reverse mortgages make them especially helpful for aging in place? After all, that's the topic we're on. So Roberta, you want to?
I do. This is such an important slide to me, and I'll tell you why. Oftentimes when people hear just the phrase reverse mortgage, they get that feeling in their gut. It's not a pleasant one. Reverse mortgages come with some stigma, and I'll tell you, because I am old myself and I've done these for a very long time. When they started, which the first one was actually written in 1961, so they've been around for a long time. But over the course of time, they were beginning to use them as a bailout loan. Somebody was in financial hardship. They gave them a reverse mortgage if they were 62 or over and thought they were bailing them out. What they didn't take into consideration was what was really financially happening, number one. And number two, they weren't looking at their income. Not everybody qualifies for a reverse mortgage for the home they're in right now. Because if you can't afford the taxes and insurance, it's really not the right place for you. So when I know we're going to talk later, but you know what, we're chatting, and it's a good time to bring in a couple that I worked with that had decided through a lot of discussion with family members they were going to get a reverse mortgage. They didn't really need it, but the gentleman's fear was he was going to leave his wife in trouble because without his income, she would not qualify for their current mortgage or any of the bills. And so we started a reverse mortgage for them. He unfortunately passed away halfway through it. His gut was right. And so for her income, Social Security income went up because he made more in Social Security than she did. She didn't know that was going to happen, but that allowed her to qualify for the taxes and insurance. So she could continue and finish the reverse mortgage, which eliminated the actual house payment. And it gave her a chance. It was horrible for her, a terrible time losing her husband. And she needed, they were married 50 years, a little over 50 years. And she had a whole house that she needed to go through, one memory at a time. And the reverse mortgage allowed her to stay there. She didn't have, at first, her daughter was like, we'll hire a moving company, we'll put everything in storage, we'll get you out of the house. And she couldn't do that. The reverse mortgage let her stay there and go through one closet at a time, donate what she wanted, just go through the house. Then a little over a year later, she decided reality hit. She kind of was done. She didn't want to live in that house by herself. She ended up selling it, paying off the reverse mortgage, and moving and living with her daughter with a nice little nest egg in the bank. And she has options. She thought about maybe she would buy a little condo there by her daughter. But for right now, she was enjoying living in the basement and being around family, being around the grandkids. But this reverse mortgage saved her soul, and it allowed her to deal with life.
So that really is one of the key points as I see it, and as I hear you tell it, Roberta, is that a lot of times the reverse mortgage is either to meet a need that can't be met otherwise, or is difficult to meet otherwise. So maybe a cash flow to be able to pay those taxes, etc. Or it may be more for a quality of life issue. Yeah, they could have moved her out there, blah, 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 taking the moving van as the daughter originally envisioned. But this really increased this lady's quality of life to be able to have that year after her husband died to say goodbye to the things and say goodbye to the home and all of that.
Yes, it really did.
Yeah, that's what I hear. And we're going to talk about that further as we get in. I think that for me is a great example, because as we get into this, we'll talk about, well, when are they maybe not as appropriate, or what are the criticisms of them? And one of them is or some of the standard advice sometimes is, well, because of the expense involved in doing a reverse mortgage, maybe you want to make sure you're going to have it for several years, and that way it kind of lessens the expense over time. Now, this lady had it for a year, and so she had that, whatever the expense she had with getting the reverse mortgage, but she had it for a year. She got a lot of peace of mind. She got the certainty that she had it. She got the ability to make her peace with her husband's passing and with the transition out of the house. For her, that money was well worth it, I take it.
Mm-hmm. And she did set up a line of credit so that when she stayed in the home, because her original goal was to stay there long term, she could take $300-400 a month and help offset maybe having somebody come and do the yard work, or help her clean the house, do certain things that maybe she couldn't afford. One thing that she felt blessed about was that she had set up that line of credit. So if she had trouble, she could use it. She never needed it. She didn't owe any money. She didn't pay any interest on that line of credit. She did nothing. She didn't incur anything from that line of credit, other than she had a little piece of security sitting there if she needed to. In the original loan app, we talked about if the furnace would have went out, if she needed major repairs, if she fell and broke her hip, and had a lot of medical bills. There were a lot of things that she feared she may not have money for. That line of credit gave her security, you know, to walk a little taller, give her dignity. I like that.
And some quality of life. So when it says here that what features make them especially helpful for aging in place, and some of the other things that you've said, for people who have a lot of money, they don't need a reverse mortgage because they have enough to do it without. For people who are so tight or so hard up that they can't maintain the tax payments on the house and the insurance and the maintenance, they can't really afford a reverse mortgage, is what I'm hearing you say at that end of the spectrum. It just doesn't work out.
Oh, do you mean that they can't afford taxes and insurance?
Right.
Yes. Then, sometimes it's buying a smaller home, but yes, we will not give them a reverse mortgage unless they can afford to stay there. But I wanted, so I didn't forget, to share with you something a little exciting. For the people who have money, they also look at a reverse mortgage, and I'll share a client with you.
Okay, do that, please.
This client, they had planned very well for retirement. They were very settled. But the one thing that was a little more expensive than they expected was a motorhome. Now, they more than could afford their mortgage and travel. They more than can afford a lot of stuff. But they decided, after hearing the reverse mortgage, I had met with them maybe 5 times. They got excited, did a reverse mortgage, pulled the cash out of their home and paid cash for a motorhome. And now they travel the world. They have no payment on the motorhome. They did have a mortgage left, but they paid that off. So they paid off their mortgage. They paid cash for the motorhome. And they're living a life that they didn't quite reach in retirement and loving it. They mail me postcards. They have children on the East Coast and the West Coast. And this allows them to go and visit them, play with the grandkids, have a place to sleep at night. It's so funny because when they go see their son, who has a few children, they all go in the motorhome and go places. It's just awesome. And they really are blessed that they did a reverse mortgage and everything that they're doing because of it.
Okay.
And you know what? Neither child wanted their home. They're buying their own home where they live now. And so it doesn't matter. They're not leaving the home to the children.
So it really was a perfect kind of a solution for them. It was a great opportunity. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So there's this last question on this page says, what features of reverse mortgages make them especially helpful for aging in place? Well, obviously one of them is you don't have to make monthly payments.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is that you can actually liquidate or take out some of the money. Is that that's really what you're talking about. Some of the equity, you can use that for certain things. And I think we've got a slide coming up about that. There is a feature with the federal government's program. You get a reverse mortgage that would be done just by, say, a bank, but it's not a government insured reverse mortgage. And the program we're talking about and the program that Roberta works with are the government insured mortgages. And those have an insurance factor that helps. You want to tell us about that? Yes.
One of the reasons that somebody, and I apologize, I get so excited, I think I'm talking out of order, but I just think that these are wonderful. But yes, when people look at the closing costs for a reverse mortgage, they see FHA, whether it's a forward mortgage or a reverse mortgage, has a one-time upfront mortgage insurance premium. That keeps the fund going for the government for these programs. And so it is an expensive cost to the people. And I certainly can, somebody could call me, I can calculate some figures for them. But that fund that everybody puts a little bit into the kitty, everybody who gets a reverse mortgage pays into that insurance. It helps everybody. A couple of things, oftentimes, if you're getting a reverse mortgage between 62 and 65, you really are very young. And HUD calculates that you're going to live to a minimum of 82 or older. If you live to 82 or older, you could become upside down on the loan. And that FHA mortgage insurance premium that people pay up front, that protects your heirs. Let's say you borrowed 50,000, your home's worth 100. And at the time that home is no longer your primary residence, you owe 110,000. Your heirs do not have to come up with that extra 10,000. They're protected by that insurance fund. And if they wanted to purchase that home, you've lived in it all your life, they want to live there, they can buy that home for 95% of the appraised value. So let's say it appraises for 100,000. They would only have to pay 95,000 to purchase that home from the fund. So it protects you.
Yeah, that's a pretty impressive piece, I think, because
Like
one of the concerns that some people have is, well, we want to hold on to our home not only for us but for our kids, or we want to hold on to the equity because we want it for our kids, and but we do need to get a reverse mortgage, and we're going to have to spend down some of that. And in the circumstances that you just mentioned, you've got a house worth 100,000, but because of the way things have gone over time, and you've maybe lived long enough, finally the interest has added up, and instead of owing just 100,000, you technically the mortgage is 110. So you don't owe more than if you sold the house. Do you pay the full 110 or do you pay the 100?
If you sell it outright, just put it on the market, you would only get 100,000, we'll say, the appraised value, and the 10,000 would be forgiven.
And that's from that
Fund.
That
Yes.
insurance fund, the federal fund.
Yes. Or you can not have to go through that heartache and just let HUD sell the home for you. And then whatever they get for the home, they take care of any other cost.
Okay. We had a lady, I will tell you, we had one example. We had a lady we worked with for many, many years, and she had done all right for herself. She'd never married, and she'd worked, and she had money, but she didn't have a lot of money. But she lived to be over 100 years of age, and over time, that money dwindled because she had to use it to live on. And she eventually got a reverse mortgage on her house. She had taken out all of the money from the reverse mortgage that the program would allow. So she had exhausted that. And finally, she came into our office one day, and she was about 102. And she said, it's time. And the neighbor was helping to take care of her, et cetera. And it was getting to be too much for her and the neighbor, to make it work. And so she says time she was going to move into long-term care. She moved into a nursing home. And she said, I've exhausted all of the equity in the house. I'm just going to give it back to the bank and let them dispose of it, much like Roberta's talking about here. And she said, so she moved into the nursing home, but she didn't let us give it back to the bank for about 2 or 3 months because her 103rd birthday was coming up, and she had the beer stored in the house for the party. And so she couldn't give up the house until we had her 103rd birthday party, and we got the beer out. And then the house was given back to the bank, and then they disposed of it as the program would have it. And in that case, the insurance fund did come into play. she did live past 104, and for her 104th birthday, we had a dance band at the nursing home, and
Oh,
it
that's
was
awesome.
it was nice. So she lived in her house until she was almost 103, with the help of a reverse mortgage. It worked beautifully for her.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
So we just talked about two features there. One of them is the insurance piece, and another part of that insurance piece is that if the kids really do want the house, and you've come up with some money up front to get into this program, they can purchase it for 95% of the appraised value at the time that you give it up, or the time of death. Okay.
I have some people, some clients that they actually no longer have a mortgage and they buy life insurance. You know, maybe the life insurance would pay off the home or pay off life for them as they see it. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
If they purchase life insurance at a certain point, it can be affordable enough so that at the time of death, it balloons into a lump sum payment that will actually then pay down or pay off the mortgage or most of it. So it does preserve some assets or replaces that asset for the next generation if people want to do that. And
I would love to attend your class on that. I think
Okay.
that's very important.
Yeah, well, it is, and we've dealt with that a lot of times. That's a little bit beyond our topic here today, but
Yes.
we've gone on to another slide here. It says they're not for everyone. What you should know, and so I think that Roberta has already said, you know, there people who have a lot of money don't need them. People who are just not quite up to it don't need them or can't utilize them. It's for people who have some need for money, but have enough equity and or cash flow that they can make it work. Would you agree with that, Roberta?
Mhm. You know, when we were all growing up, you know, we were taught, first of all, to pay off our home. But geez, 50 years ago, 100,000 took care of a lot more than it takes care of today. With the rising cost of medication, assistance, maybe back then I thought I was going to live and be extremely, I don't know, flexible and do things where now, oh, I could use a little help. You know, so they're not for everybody, but, and I don't want to say they're for middle, but they really are for the middle. You're right. That just didn't quite plan enough.
Right, right. I would agree. And you know, when we talk about reverse mortgages, and as Roberta had alluded to earlier, sometimes you know the phrase reverse mortgage has some negative connotations, and you know I wrote down a few things that I've thought of that you know I've heard over the years, and I think Roberta's already addressed at least a couple of them. One of them was that at one time there were some kind of sloppy lending procedures, and Roberta covered it when she said they were, you know, if I was too needy and I wasn't able to make my bills and I was falling behind, we might try giving me a reverse mortgage. But it oftentimes wasn't enough because I just didn't have enough, and even with the reverse mortgage, it didn't do it. And there were problems ages ago with the program when, as they used to put it, you know, Granny got a reverse mortgage, but she didn't keep up with the taxes. And at that time, Wells Fargo got out of the reverse mortgage market because they were faced with an untenable choice. They either foreclose on Granny, which would have gotten them a lot of bad publicity, or they just go ahead and absorb that loss of additional loss of taxes, which wasn't planned for, out of the program. And so that's why I think they ultimately have done what Roberta has talked about here, and that is they've cleaned up the program. You know, everything in life, you find out what works and what doesn't, and you make amends, and that's one.
And some people, you know, when they get a reverse mortgage, they qualify for a LESA, LESA, LESA.
Tell us about that.
You may need to do a Lisa that will set aside equity for a certain period of time. I just had a lady where it was 18 years, but a Lisa is money set aside to pay your taxes and insurance every year. One of the most important things is you only draw on that Lisa every year to pay your taxes and insurance. So you may have 75,000 in that Lisa, but you only use 2,000 a year, and you only accumulate on your equity 2,000 a year for the taxes and insurance. But the Lisa helps people. I've met with people that own their home free and clear, but they want to stay in their home, but if they pay their taxes and insurance, they're a little short in other areas. Well, setting up a Lisa is no different than on a forward mortgage, setting up an escrow for taxes and insurance, where it makes that payment for you every month. A Lisa on a reverse mortgage pays that payment for you every year.
So I think that's a marvelous piece as well. And I think that's one of the things that I think is great in terms of what they have upgraded to. So, in that circumstance that we're talking about, maybe the person can't make it just for the taxes and insurance, but we can use the equity to do that. So that actually stretches that program a little bit in a mindful way, and one that works out well for the borrower and the government.
And it does not disqualify you, at least in the Quad Cities, for some seniors, because of their income, they qualify for reduced property taxes. I just closed on one. The gentleman had no idea. He had been to the places and they didn't tell him about that. He saved himself half his tax bill because of his income when I was setting up the Lisa. Jeez. But some seniors, because of their income, qualify for maybe a free furnace or maybe help with the roof. We have agencies that will help elderly. Just because you have a reverse mortgage, it doesn't disqualify you for those programs because it's not considered income. And it's not abusing the program. It's helping a senior to pay their taxes and insurance and remain in their home with a quality of life. But it also allows them to have some other benefits that help the senior, because he's going to save $1,000 a year on his taxes. But you know what? His medications just went up $50. So it just helps.
Well, I would go beyond that, Roberta. I would say, and I think you've raised a really interesting and important point, and that is we find that it is generally less expensive to keep people in their homes or at home or at a less restrictive level of care and placement than if we accelerate moving them on through the system. And so somebody who is forced to leave their home earlier than they might otherwise be ready means that they're going to get into some kind of care. They're going to have to come up with rent, or they're going to be in independent living, which has a tendency to have a certain level of expense as well, or maybe move into assisted living. And ultimately into long-term care, and ultimately consuming their assets and placing them on Medicaid or VA aided attendance or whatever. And so to the extent that society makes this investment up front, it really can and does save itself some money there. So I think it's very important.
Yes, because staying at home where your expenses are much lower and getting a reverse mortgage where you can draw on it if you need 300 or 400. I'm learning in the Quad Cities, we have an amazing array of agencies and different things that can help seniors. And, but let's pretend it's me and I'm sitting there and I see different flyers about wonderful programs. They seem affordable, but for me, they're just not quite affordable. Well, you know what? A reverse mortgage could help them.
I think so in many cases. We got a slide up here now that says what expenses are they best used for? And we've kind of categorized them. There's the basic necessities of life, there's maintaining a standard of living, and then there's quality of life. So you just gave an example of your people who used it for quality of life. They paid off their loan, they liquidated some of their equity, and they purchased a mobile home. And they really added largely to their quality of life. In fact, they probably raised their standard of living to some extent from when they were working. They maintained or improved their quality of life and that of their family. And so they spent the money for that. And you've got it on other people, the basic necessities of life. They're living at home, they don't have a mortgage, but they may need it to pay those taxes because they don't have enough income. They can pay they can pay for their other basic necessities of life, but if they have to start paying the taxes on the home, or if they have to start paying rent, then they may not be able to make it all work. So, any other comments on this particular slide, Roberta?
Yes. Well, in backing up just for a minute on that other slide, well, the quality of life, the one thing that's exciting also on a reverse mortgage, because you don't have that monthly payment, I have clients who actually want to live in Florida 4 to 6 months out of the year. Do you know I can have a reverse mortgage on my home and live in Florida for a few months out of the year? This is still my primary residence, but when the snow flies, I'm out of here. And so people, when we talk about maybe people who are sitting well off, I don't know how else to put it, I apologize.
Better off, I guess.
Better, yes. They still see the benefit of allowing them to have their home here, but not have the mortgage, or pull cash out of their home here without a payment and pay for something away. Not just Florida, South Carolina. I just had somebody that went to North or South Carolina. They're so excited,
Yeah. I think you gave us an example too about somebody who could quit a part-time job, perhaps, or they were having health issues, and the use of the reverse mortgage allowed them to replace some of that part-time income.
Yes, thank you. That's a big one. Because people are having to work too long now because to survive, and a reverse mortgage can help them retire and gain the monthly income that they're losing maybe from the part-time job.
Yeah. So one of this ongoing themes is if you already have some money, it really, really works. If you're short on money, it can be a lifesaver. If you just don't have enough money to utilize this tool, then we have to look for other tools. Okay.
Yes.
Like subsidized housing or whatever. Gail is giving us a hint, I think. I was with you on that, Roberta, kind of going back to the last slide, but I know Gail, and I think she's given me a hint, and you too, I guess. She's saying we got to move it on. So we'll.
I apologize.
No, you don't need to make any apologize at all. But then we've got a slide that says, well, what about the taxes? What about estate administration? What about Medicaid and your legacy? I think you've already mentioned the taxes. Monies that come in through the reverse mortgage are not taxed. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. You do not pay taxes on that money.
And even if it's, go ahead.
If you have a line of credit that's sitting there and it's in a growth fund, which means it's growing every day, funds go up, but they do certainly go up. It's a growth fund. You don't pay taxes on that money either.
On the increase. Now that's a nice
Yes.
piece about this, because that's a special piece. All right, because normally you wouldn't pay taxes on the sale of your house. Therefore, you can understand why liquidating through or part of the equity through the reverse mortgage program, you wouldn't pay taxes either. But if you took the money and you put it in a growth fund, usually you're going to be paying taxes on the increase. Okay. And you're either going to be paying them annually, or you maybe have it in something that is tax deferred. But this is tax eliminated. Am I correct?
Yes. Now, as far as Medicaid, I tell people to check with a professional. And the reason why I say that is because it's, to my understanding, if you have to start going on Medicaid and you have this home as an asset, it's beyond my expertise.
Right. Well, that's
not affect Social Security,
right.
But I'm very unsure about Medicaid.
It is, and that's why, and that's where Roberta and me can work together, and we do with reverse mortgages, because they can be part of an overall plan. And the question is, you don't want to be utilizing some device or some tool that creates a problem over here. So we want to look at the whole picture. It's not just about doing a reverse mortgage or doing this thing or that thing. It's really about a much more holistic picture, and that's one of the reasons why it's good to work with people like us in tandem. So, a state administration, generally speaking, if you've got the house and you pass away, so if there's two people and they have the house and one passes, it goes to the other one. Oftentimes, at least with a reverse mortgage, they'll hold it as tenants in common, or excuse me, as joint tenants. Then when the second one passes, the estate very often would be liquidated. Okay, it would be an estate administration. If the house has been, if the equity is fully gone, it may be that again we surrender it to the bank and then we let them take care of it. Okay. Generally speaking, the going on to the Medicaid piece, generally speaking, the monies that come off of, let's say we get $300 a month off of the reverse mortgage, that that's not generally going to be considered to be income for Medicaid purposes, because we're really liquidating part of the house. But if I need Medicaid and I'm not at home now, one of the things that we really haven't mentioned, Roberta, is that sometimes this can be used for paying for some help coming into the house. So if I start to need help with long-term care and I can get by on a certain level, it may be that the reverse mortgage, we take out so much a month and that helps pay for the long-term care to come into the house. At a certain point, long-term care needs become great enough that I may have to be institutionalized. I may have to go into, say, a nursing home, assisted living, or a nursing home. I may have to leave my home and do that. When I leave my home, we have 1 year to pay off the reverse mortgage and take care of the house. Is that correct? Under the
what it is they tell you on the mortgage that you have 90 days.
Okay.
At the end of that 90 days, you just need to call the lender and tell them, I still am trying to get my
affairs in order.
And it is our intent to, and what's your intent? If you're wanting to sell it, or if you're wanting, you're still fixing up, cleaning up, they will allow you up to a year. But it does say every 90 days you have to check in with them.
Right. And that's a little easier to deal with if I've died and we're just administering my affairs after I've died. If I'm trying to go on to Medicaid and there's money I'm going to get from that house, and I've moved out and I'm going to sell the house or whatever, and I've still got some equity, then Medicaid may say, oh, okay, well, you're not going to live in the house and you're going to sell it, and therefore it's not an exempt asset anymore, and you may get some money out of it. So we might count that against you. Similarly, if I've taken some money out, I've put it in one of those accounts that Roberta's talking about. I've put it in like a savings type of an account or an investment account. It's building up, and if that's available to me, that might count too. So that we could probably do a whole session on that. But so
I think that's
Medicaid,
great.
yeah, the Medicaid piece is complex, and so if there's any idea that somebody might want to go into Medicaid, then we may want to take a look at it, when we're doing the reverse mortgage. Last one there, it says your legacy. And what are we talking about with a legacy? Well, as we mentioned earlier, if I live in my house and I take out the as much equity as I can, and the debt builds up over time, it may be that I don't have a house to leave to the next generation. And sometimes that's kind of stated in a negative way. But if I don't have enough money to leave to the next generation, I don't. We tell people all the time, it's mom and dad's money. If there's a dime left when mom and dad are gone, it's a dime more than you're legally entitled to expect. Now, a lot of people like to leave a legacy to their kids. So maybe we go back to what Roberta's talking about. We say, well, I'm going to have to use that, but I can get some life insurance to replace that. That's a possibility. Or it may be that the kids are getting their legacy now. In the examples, some of the examples that Roberta has given, the kids have been relieved of coming to help mom do some of that, or take mom in, at least in some of those. In the couple that had the motorhome, and the kids and grandkids are going to travel with them at times, they're pre-pulling their legacy down before grandma and grandpa are gone. Yes. They're just as grandma and grandpa are enjoying the money while they've still got the home, the other family members are still enjoying their legacy while they've still got grandma and grandpa. So that's pretty powerful, and that's pretty cool. We need to go to the next slide. I know that. What's that? Okay. Well, it seems to me that this slide has to do with what you were talking about earlier, Roberta, and that is that you can't wait until you start to slide into financial difficulties in order to go for a reverse mortgage. Is that correct?
It is. It's better to set up a line of credit now. If you don't use it, you don't use it. But don't wait and all of a sudden something happens and you're scurrying trying to get a reverse mortgage. Your credit's in trouble and you don't qualify.
Yeah. So that has changed over time, as we've been talking about. That's one of the themes here today. So it means that it's like a lot of things in life, and it's like a lot of planning. We always say it always seems too early until it's too late. It always seems too much until it's not enough. So if you're doing your retirement and your aging planning, and you're concerned about having enough either to meet those basic necessities or your standard of living and not have to contract your standard of living, or to be able to enhance your quality of life, if you're concerned about those things, then you need to do a plan. And if we think we have to do a reverse mortgage, we need to make some solid planning for that. And we need to plan when the time is going to be that you're going to do that. We can't just wait until the crisis happens.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So it's question time. Gail, you got us there.
I did. For the question time, if you have a question, you can type it into the chat area, or I know we do have some people by phone, and so they can't do that. But if you're a phone person, if you unmute yourself, I will see that pop up on my screen, and I'll know that you are unmuted, and I can call on you then to ask your question. So we can do it either way.
How do they unmute themselves? It's more than just speaking up.
I believe you hold down the space bar.
That's on a computer.
That's on a computer. That's right. On the phone.
Wasn't there a star something or other? Those were star
And actually
67s and star
the
68, I think.
the person that is on the phone,
Should have had some
um,
directions or
well,
instructions.
they have done that before.
Yeah.
So they do know how. I do have a couple of questions though, to start us off with. When I sell my house, if I have not had the reverse mortgage for a long time, so I sell the house for $100,000 and maybe the reverse mortgage totals up to only 60,000, that leaves 40,000 minus the closing costs that comes back to me. Am I correct? So if I haven't actually used up all of the value, then money will come back to me or my family if I'm dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how does the reverse mortgage company get paid?
Do you mean the income for the loan?
How is the reverse mortgage company
How does the
able
debt
to
get paid?
Yes. Is there a closing cost when I set up my reverse mortgage that is basically keeping the mortgage company alive, in business, or is it just on interest that they're taking out, or when they get my house back? Which one of those pieces actually makes it possible for the mortgage company to exist?
On a mortgage, whether it's a forward or a reverse mortgage, they earn money when they sell the servicing on the secondary market. I, as a loan officer, a little person, that's the knowledge I have. But that's really, in a nutshell, how they get paid. It's by the servicing of the loan.
And then it's like, as Roberta says, it's the same thing for a forward or reverse mortgage. There's a pot of money. Okay. So in the example of the old savings and loans, people used to come and they would deposit their money in savings accounts and they would be paid a certain amount of interest. Okay. And the association would loan those funds out and take a mortgage back, and they would have monthly payments coming in, so they'd have a stream of income, and they would charge on the mortgage, they would charge a little bit more in interest than they paid out to the depositors. And that's where their income really came from. And as Roberta says, today it's largely done through servicing. There are groups that do that. Of course, when the house is paid off, then that money is put back into the tank, and it's ready to be loaned again to somebody else. So you have to have a mortgage company obviously has to have a tank full of cash.
And the third question, when I move into a nursing home and I'm ready to give my house back to the reverse mortgage company, can I just walk away, or does my family, somebody need to come in and clean the house, get the house ready, take everything out, whatever? Who gets the stuff out of the house?
Good question. It really is personal preference, because see, for me, my son may want to come and get all my belongings and do whatever with them, keep them, sell them, whatever. And if there's equity left in the home, I hope he'll sell it and keep that equity. Or he can say, you know what, Mom, I live in California now, just let the bank have it. I don't usually see that unless there either is no heirs or if they're upside down. The belongings are still taken care of, but then the bank takes the house back because it's upside down.
So I could my family would come in and take the personal things, the stuff that anyone might really care about.
The beer.
But yeah, the beer for the party. But the old sofa, the lamp, that kind of stuff that they're going to look at and say, oh my, that's dated. They could just walk away and the bank will dispose of. Is that a correct assumption? It can be whatever they want to take, they can take, and the bank's going to deal with the rest.
If that's their wishes, yes.
Yeah, generally speaking, that's right. The bank will essentially foreclose on that mortgage if you leave it to the bank, and they'll dispose of the house. So they'll clean it out, et cetera, et cetera. That adds to some of the expenses for the program. So they're probably happier when your relatives clean out the house, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe they'll sell the beer and offset some of those expenses.
Hand it off to the moving crew.
Right.
I do not see
usually, just so you know, or the viewers know, I really don't, and I have done this for a very long time. I don't see many people are upside down. There's generally plenty of equity left over that if somebody chose, they could take care of the things on the inside and sell it.
Yeah. So what that tells me is that the program has been, over the 60 years that it's been in place, its design has been improved to make it more fail-safe and better for the borrowers and for the government, so that there are less losses. And to the extent that the borrower is a little more mindful about how they utilize that loan, they may very well end up with equity in the house for themselves or their families.
It makes it important too, when people do reverse mortgages, if they don't have a will, to set up a will, because oftentimes they don't have family members here to leave the home to. They leave it to a church that can come in and do the same thing, maybe have an auction and then sell the home.
Yeah.
I do not see any other questions posed.
Okay. So here is the information about Roberta. Again, thank you, Roberta. She is a senior loan originator with Cherry Creek Mortgage Company, specializing in forward and reverse mortgages and serving the Iowa and Illinois communities. That was helpful.
I like to mention that because I do report to the Chicago office, but I live here in Davenport. So
yeah.
We like to know that people are here in town, a
yes,
little closer at home, even if the home office is elsewhere.
Right. And for people who are looking at this who are nowhere near Illinois or Iowa, the same basic principles apply. And so this is an educational piece, even if Roberta or we aren't necessarily in a position to help you with that. But that's kind of where things are.
Our upcoming presentations, this is not particularly the order that they will be in on the monthly presentations. We are still doing a little fine tuning on that. We will, in the very, very near future, have a schedule of what will be on what month posted on the website coming up. But these are upcoming topics. Any that you needed to discuss, Jamie?
No, not really. I would say that, we're talking about perspectives on aging in place. We want to thank you, and we want to thank Roberta for joining us today for our first one. I think it went quite well, and I think it was informative, and certainly was fun, I thought, at least on our part.
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And I think that one of the first things that comes up is, you want to age in place. How do you afford it? And how do you make it work? And of course, reverse mortgages are one of the first tools that come in mind to do that, or to be part of the piece. They may not be the whole picture. They may be in use with other things, but yeah, they're definitely have their place. They're definitely quite useful, and they have some very nice perks and features, I would say, that may just hit the spot for some people. Not everybody's going to get one, or needs one or wants one, but they're really a quite versatile tool to really improve a lot of people's quality of life and maintain their standard of living.
One of the points that Roberta brought up when we were talking about Medicaid was that is not her expertise. Her expertise is in mortgages. And so just as a reminder, GolderCare is we're in the middle kind of the spoke, or bridging the gaps. We have expertise in many areas, but we're not the absolute expert on things like reverse mortgages, but we do know who to talk to. So we're looking at the overall picture and then contacting the individual people that we need to talk to for fine tuning that expertise
so
that's needed for your situation.
With Roberta and her people and her clients. So once again, thank you, Roberta. I think it's always nice to be able to have an industry expert, somebody with as much experience as yourself, to offer the insights that you have. It's been helpful. Thank you.
And again, thank you for having me.
And thank you. And if you have questions you think of later, you can always send them in to the email address, elc@goldercare.com, ELC for Empowered Living Club at goldercare.com, or you can give us a call and we'll try to give you answers to those questions. So thank you all. And thank you, Roberta, and we will see you next month.